was that I wouldn't be able to show up in time, and then I would end up in contempt of court and they would have me arrested. Nice try, folks. Nah, that ain't gonna go.
How Gypsy Rose filed a lawsuit against April Johns, which is Fancy Macelli, or Marcella.
Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. It's finally happened. Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her family, because Christy, Rod, and Mia are also listed in the lawsuit, are trying to get an injunction placed against Fancy Macelli, who is the woman who heads up the Good Wives Network, which you can check out here on YouTube.
I hope you guys understand that I'm not unhinged. I'm just right, and I'm tired of being told I'm not.
It's quite an interesting situation because according to Fancy, she was never served with the paperwork and she only knows that the injunction is happening because Flawless Nina, a creator on TikTok, made a video about it. And that's how Fancy found out.
Is that how Gypsy Rose filed a lawsuit against April Johns, which is Fancy Macelli, or Marcella? Let's talk about it. Child, y'all see this? Gypsy Rose Anderson cut off Louisiana. And this lawsuit is for April Johns.
Flawless Nina's video is linked below, and of course, Fancy Macelli, aka April Johns, is questioning where Nina got this information, how she got the document, because Fancy says, I was never served. I've only received an email, and then I heard about it on Nina's show. Like, why wasn't this delivered directly for me? Is that even legal? This video is going to be a short summary of what's going on, along with some information about like where I fall in all of this and what happened to me regarding some of this SHIT. But I will link Flawless Nina's video below, but also, of course, Fancy Macelli's video, which I think is like going on 2 hours long.
I don't know.
Hun, it keeps throwing me out.
Okay, here's a quick 411 on Fancy Macelli. I have a million videos about her, but basically she's a YouTube creator. She also has a big Facebook group. It's all called the Good Wives Network, and she has a lot of people that work with her on it, but the face of the group is definitely Fancy Macelli, aka April Johns. Several years ago, she got involved with Gypsy and her mother, Christy Blanchard. Christy Blanchard was her main contact, and Fancy Macelli is definitely a big part, like the main part of Christy Blanchard's toxic web of YouTube and social media creators. Fancy had a very close relationship with Christy Blanchard, and she ended up acting as the family's spokesperson for a period of time while Gypsy was in prison. She had a major falling out with Gypsy. It seems to be over Ken Urker, and I have a video coming out about that soon. And Gypsy didn't want to work with her anymore, and then Christy had to abandon her as well because Christy understood the money and the story was all about Gypsy, and they needed to go whichever way Gypsy Rose Blanchard wanted to go with it. What proceeded was absolute chaos. A group of social media creators, to include Katie Joy Paulson, ended up ganging up on Fancy Macelli, allegedly under the direction and lead of Christy Blanchard, who was not happy with Fancy anymore. They did really insane things like make Facebook pages about Fancy's lady parts. Fancy claims she was bullied and harassed endlessly, and all she wanted to do was put out a documentary or a book or something about all of the information she gathered about Gypsy, because from her point of view, she believed that she had uncovered some really crazy secrets about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She had come to allege that Gypsy and Christy Blanchard were creating a false narrative about what happened with Gypsy and that she never had Munchausen's by proxy. You can learn all about this on Fancy's channel. And right after Gypsy was released from prison, Fancy Macelli was supposed to do a really big, like, national interview with some broadcasting station. I'm not sure if it was like ABC or what, but apparently Christy and Gypsy went directly to the people who were producing the interview and told them, hey, we will never work with you if you interview Fancy Macelli. She's cuckoo! And they said, like, we'll give you an interview instead of Fancy if you choose to ignore her. And that's exactly what happened. They dropped Fancy like a hot potato. She never got to give her interview or talk about her side of the story or the fact that she was going to write a book about it or whatever. And she got really frustrated about this. Obviously, she felt like they were completely silencing her because they don't like what she has to say. So Fancy Macelli went straight to YouTube and divulged a whole bunch of information. She had been keeping like semi-private or only talking about in her podcast or only giving like bits and pieces of. She let it all hang out. During this time, she also appeared to be going a little bit crazy. This is just my opinion, but you can go back and watch the videos. I've even got them on my channel. She said to all of us, she let us know, like, I have some mental health issues. I also recently had a surgery and I'm coming down from the meds of it. And yeah, she was acting cuckoo, in my opinion, on her channel. But she was bringing facts and information that everybody could like find really shocking, right? Like, she was bringing forth information about what happened to Gypsy that no one had ever heard before. And she got a lot of other creators questioning what was going on with Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She created friendships with some of these creators and they would fall out just as quickly as they became friends because, once again, Good Wives Network and Fancy Macelli, they just don't have the best reputation of keeping up good relationships with other creators. Let's put it that way, in my opinion. All right. And in the background of all of this, Gypsy and Christy were not happy. It's been all over TikTok, all over Facebook. They are not happy with Fancy. Especially Christy Blanchard has been going in and out of chats, many other creators' chats, trying to get them to turn against Fancy, talking a lot of schmeck about Fancy, and really wanting people to turn against her. It is a sick and sad, toxic web, especially for women that are in their 50s and 60s. It's quite interesting for me to watch from a distance. But I do want to add into this entire first part of the story that shortly after Gypsy was released in January, I was following Gypsy very closely. In February, I started making a lot of videos. And in February, Fancy Macelli, I've spoken about this before, sent me a cease and desist because I spoke about her channel. I told people they should go check her out. I said I had a lot of disagreements with her about what she was saying, but I also found the information really interesting, and she does have good information and people should go and take a look at it. And she sent me a very nasty cease and desist. She didn't like that I use like a short clip within the rules of YouTube. I use like a short clip from one of her videos, and she didn't want me to talk about her because, once again, I've said it before, she asked me to do an interview with her. I told her I don't do interviews on my channel because I have really poor internet service living in the middle of nowhere, and it was shortly after that that I received the cease and desist from her. I find this all quite interesting because whereas she was trying very hard to silence me, and we had a whole discussion about this, and she was in an uproar about me talking about her, she's now very angry and very frustrated and wants everyone to help and support and lend money to her fight against being silenced by Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I just want to say I actually fully support trying to ensure that Fancy Macelli cannot be silenced by Gypsy Rose Blanchard, despite that Fancy tried to silence me, because I have a big issue with how the First Amendment rights are playing out with a lot of people going to court and trying to silence many social media creators. I've seen this all over YouTube, even with the person that I really, really do not like and have a big issue with, the creator that I feel is most toxic on this platform, Katie Joy Paulson. I do not believe that her First Amendment rights should be taken away from her. I do believe in using the legal system to go after someone when there is libel involved. And that means that someone is very obviously lying about you and you can prove it. I don't really believe in the whole defamation thing. Show me libel. Show me how a creator is libeling you and how you can prove that they're lying about you, and I could understand taking that to court. But I do not feel that you should be able to go to court when someone is expressing their opinion about you on social media. So I do believe in supporting Fancy in her fight against Christy and Gypsy. So let's get into what Fancy has to say about what Gypsy is taking her to court over.
I think what they were
Okay, first
counting
and
on.
foremost, Fancy seems to be taking this whole lawsuit thing in stride. She's essentially like, yeah, I need some money and some support and some help to get this taken care of. But I'm also like, hey, like, comment, share. I need this to go out everywhere. And she goes over that many times in the stream. She's like, yeah, now that they're coming after me, let's make sure we let everyone know who I am and what's going on. So it's kind of interesting to me because I do think that Gypsy Rose has now given Fancy a good opportunity to make her name become like more of a viral sensation because she's being sued by Gypsy Rose Blanchard. So Fancy needs help and support, but let me go into just giving you a quick rundown of what's happening with this quote-unquote lawsuit. Essentially, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, along with her mom, Christy Blanchard, Rod, and Mia, they're all listed in the paperwork, are asking for an injunction against Fancy Macelli so that she can no longer speak about them or try to put out negative content about them through her social media. The paperwork basically states that they need Fancy to come to Missouri, where Gypsy Rose Blanchard was held prisoner after being found guilty of second-degree murder. They want all the legal stuff to go down in Missouri. I find this incredibly interesting, guys. It's all about like what state they looked at that they felt they could get the best possible situation out of. Like Gypsy and Christy probably had some attorneys look into it for them, and they realized that Missouri was probably the best possible state for them to go after Fancy in. Of course, they don't want to go to her state because that makes it easier for her. So they're trying to get this all done in Missouri, where Gypsy Rose Blanchard was held prisoner for over 6 years. They are also using the attorney that got her off, that was her defense attorney in her murder case. So they already had like this pre-established relationship with him. And essentially in the court documents, they are arguing that a lot of experts have looked into the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case, and Gypsy has been diagnosed with Munchausen's by proxy, and that all of the shit that April Johns, aka Fancy Macelli, does on her social media is try to promote the idea that Gypsy Rose Blanchard never was a victim of Munchausen's by proxy. That Fancy Macelli has dedicated her content to exposing her opinion and her belief that Gypsy Rose Blanchard murdered her mother because she just wasn't a very good person and she wanted to date a bunch of boys. And you can go over to Fancy's channel to learn more about what her specific comments and allegations are towards Gypsy, but she does not believe that Gypsy was really abused at all, according to Fancy. She has access to Gypsy's medical records, and in this legal document, Gypsy states that she gave Fancy that access by signing the document for her to get the medical records while she was at that Missouri prison, and that is why the case must take place in the state of Missouri. That's her argument for jurisdiction in the state of Missouri. That's a big deal because getting jurisdiction in Missouri will probably serve Gypsy Rose Blanchard much better than it will Fancy Macelli. So in Fancy's latest video, which again will be linked below, she makes the case, she's letting us all know that she will definitely be showing up 110%. She's showing up to the Missouri courtroom to make an appearance and go up against Christy and Gypsy. She's like, no matter what I have to do, I'm going to make this work. And first and foremost, I'm going to be arguing jurisdiction. This shouldn't take place in Missouri. They should have to bring it to my home state. I think she'll be able to get jurisdiction through, as most people like in these kinds of YouTube social media battles have been able to make it happen in the past. But secondarily, she wants us all to know that if she doesn't, she's going to fight this based upon the concept of freedom of speech under the First Amendment. She's going to claim like she's not harassing or belittling or lying about Gypsy, that she is bringing facts to her channel. She's showing evidence, and it's really important to her to be able to continue to expose her opinions about Gypsy. Now, one issue I see coming up against this is that Fancy Macelli has a tendency on her channel to be very much like, no, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm the only one with the facts. That is a little bit of a problem. You definitely want to be open to letting people know that this is your opinion and people need to make their own conclusions about what's going on. But overall, I really do support Fancy's fight to ensure that she can continue to speak out on her social media platforms. I think that that's what's reasonable under the First Amendment, and I hope that all of you will support her too. You can definitely go and check out the Good Wives Network channel. Like I said, I am not a big supporter of everything that Fancy believes in. Very much not. And I also see a lot of hypocrisy going on over there. But at the same time, I do want to help protect her First Amendment rights. So I hope you'll go over and check out the channel and also check out Flawless Nina. Thank you so much for joining me down this rabbit hole. I hope that you'll join me again tomorrow as we head down another crazy rabbit hole.